The knock startled me. It wasn't loud, but it came at a strange time, 11:47 p.m. I was sitting on the couch, half asleep in front of the TV. For a second, I thought I imagined it. But then it came again, a little more insistent. When I opened the door, there was Ryan, my nephew. He looked terrible, sweaty, pale, eyes darting everywhere but at me. Ryan? I frowned. What's going on? It's late. He opened his mouth, closed it, and then tried again. Can I come in? His voice shook, and he looked like he might collapse. Yeah, sure. I stepped aside, confused but trying to keep calm. You okay? No, he said simply, walking in like a man carrying something too heavy. He sat on the edge of the couch, hunched over, hands gripping his knees like they were the only thing keeping him together. I stayed standing. Something about him put me on edge. Ryan wasn't like this. He was confident, even cocky most days. But now, he looked broken. What happened? I asked, more urgently this time. He took a deep breath and finally looked up at me. His eyes were red, his face drawn. It's about Jessica, he said. The way he said her name made my chest tighten. Jessica, my wife. What about her? I asked slowly, a knot forming in my stomach. He stopped, shaking his head. I don't know how to tell you this. Then spit it out. I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. What about Jessica? He looked at me like he wished he could be anywhere else. And then he said it. I've been sleeping with her. It didn't register at first. I just stood there, blinking at him, my brain refusing to process what I just heard. What? He swallowed, his atoms apple bobbing. I've been in a relationship with Jessica. For months. The room spun. I grabbed the back of the chair to steady myself. You're lying, I said, my voice low. Tell me you're lying. I'm not, he said, his voice cracking. I'm sorry, Uncle Jack. I didn't mean for this to happen. You didn't mean for it to happen? My voice rose, cutting him off. You didn't mean to sleep with my wife? Don't give me that bullshit. I swear, I didn't. Stop. I held up a hand, shaking my head. Just stop. He fell silent, his head hanging low. How long? I asked after a moment. What? How long? My voice was sharp, each word like a blade. A few months, he admitted, barely above a whisper. A few months, I repeated, laughing bitterly. So you've been sneaking around behind my back for months, and now you suddenly feel guilty? He flinched but didn't say anything. What? Did she dump you? Is that why you're here? I demanded. No, he said quickly. It's not that. It's worse. Worse. My laugh was hollow. What could possibly be worse than this? She's been with others too, he said, his voice shaking. Not just me. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Others? I repeated. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. I found out a few weeks ago. I thought it was just us, but there are others. I don't even know how many. I stared at him, my hands clenched into fists. My body felt like it was on fire, every nerve screaming. You're telling me, I said slowly, my voice trembling with anger, that my wife has been cheating on me, with you and God knows who else, and you just now decided to tell me? I didn't know how, he said, his voice breaking. I didn't want to hurt you. Hurt me? I snapped. You think you can make this better by telling me now? After months? After she's been sleeping with half the damn town? I'm sorry, he whispered, his face crumpling. Get out, I said, my voice deadly calm. What? Get out, I roared, pointing to the door. He stumbled to his feet, tears streaming down his face. Uncle Jack, don't. I stepped toward him, my whole body shaking with rage. Just go. He looked like he wanted to say something, but then he thought better of it. He turned and walked out the door without another word. When the door clicked shut behind him, I stood there in the silence, my fists still clenched, my chest heaving. My head was spinning, my heart pounding. Jessica, my wife, the woman I had built my life with. She wasn't just unfaithful, she was a liar, a stranger. I sat down on the couch, my hands shaking as I ran them through my hair. My mind was racing, flashing through memories of her. Her smile, her laugh, the way she used to look at me. Was any of it real? And the worst part was, I didn't even know the full truth yet. But I would. I was going to get answers, no matter what it took. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ryan's face, heard his words. By the time Jessica walked through the door the next morning, I was sitting at the kitchen table, my coffee untouched, my fists clenched around the mug. "Morning," she said casually, dropping her purse on the counter. "You're up early." I stared at her, barely able to believe the person standing in front of me. The woman I'd loved. The woman I thought I knew. She turned to me, her smile fading. "What's wrong?" "Sit down," I said, my voice cold and flat. Her brow furrowed. "Why? What happened?" "Sit down." She hesitated, then pulled out a chair across from me. "Jack, you're scaring me. What's going on?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her, studying her face, trying to find some trace of the woman I thought I married. "Ryan came over last night," I said finally. Her eyes flickered, just for a second, but I caught it. "Oh," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "What did he want?" "You tell me," I said, leaning forward. "What do you think he wanted, Jessica?" "I don't know," she said, shifting uncomfortably. "Why don't you just tell me?" I slammed my hand on the table, making her jump. "Stop lying to me," I shouted. "Ryan told me everything." Her face went pale. "Jack, don't." I cut her off, my voice shaking with anger. "Don't you dare sit there and lie to me. He told me about the two of you, about how you've been sneaking around behind my back for months." She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. "Jack, please, let me explain." "Explain?" I laughed bitterly. "What's there to explain, Jessica? That you've been sleeping with my nephew? That you've been lying to my face every single day?" "It wasn't like that," she said, her voice trembling. "Then what was it like?" I snapped. "Tell me, Jessica. Help me understand, because right now, all I see is a liar and a cheat." She looked down at her hands, her breathing uneven. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered. "There it is again," I said, laughing bitterly. "You didn't mean for it to happen. That's what Ryan said too. You both didn't mean it. So what? You tripped and fell into his bed?" "Stop it," she said, her voice rising. "You don't understand, Jack." "Then make me understand," I yelled. She flinched, tears welling up in her eyes. "You weren't there," she shouted back. "You were always working, always too busy to notice me. I was lonely, Jack. I needed someone, and Ryan. He was there." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "You're blaming me?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You're actually sitting here and blaming me for this?" "I'm not blaming you," she said, her voice softer now. "I'm just saying, it wasn't just about the physical stuff. I felt invisible." I stared at her, the anger boiling inside me. "Invisible?" I said, my voice trembling. "Do you know how hard I worked to give us a good life? To make sure you never had to worry about anything? And this is how you repay me? By sleeping with my nephew?" "I'm sorry," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Sorry?" I stood up, pacing the room. "Sorry doesn't even begin to cover this, Jessica. Do you even know what you've done? You've destroyed everything." "I know," she said, her voice breaking. "I know I hurt you, Jack, and I'll do whatever it takes to fix this." I stopped pacing and looked at her, my chest heaving. "Fix this?" I said, laughing bitterly. "There's no fixing this, Jessica. You didn't just break my heart. You shattered it." She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Jack, please. I love you." I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. "No, Jessica. You don't get to say that. Not after what you've done." The room fell silent, the weight of her betrayal hanging between us like a storm cloud. Finally, I turned away, my hands shaking. "I need some time," I said, my voice barely audible. "I need to think." "Jack, don't," I said, cutting her off. "Just don't." Without another word, I walked out the door, leaving her sitting there in silence. I didn't know where I was driving. I just needed to be away. From her, from the house, from the suffocating weight of it all. The steering wheel felt slick under my palms. My fingers trembled, not from the cold, but from the adrenaline coursing through me. I pulled into some random parking lot, a diner, or maybe a gas station. I couldn't tell. The lights blurred together. My chest felt tight, like someone had tied a rope around it and was pulling tighter and tighter. I tried to breathe, but it felt like every breath got stuck halfway. And then it hit me. Everything Ryan had said, everything she had done, and I slammed my fists against the steering wheel. Once, twice, hard enough that the horn blared into the silence of the night. Damn it, I yelled. My voice cracked, raw and desperate. I couldn't believe this was my life. I don't remember deciding to drive to Lisa's. I think my body just took over, like it knew I needed her. She was my anchor, always had been. She knew how to put me back together, even when I didn't want to be. It was late, close to midnight, when I knocked on her door. She answered in her pajamas, her hair tied up, a book in her hand. The second she saw me, her expression shifted. "Jack," she said softly, "what's wrong?" I couldn't even get the words out. I just shook my head and stepped inside. She didn't ask questions, just followed me into the living room and sat next to me on the couch. "What happened?" she asked after a moment, her voice careful, like she was afraid I might break. "She cheated," I said. The words felt foreign in my mouth, like they belonged to someone else. Lisa blinked. "Jessica?" I nodded, staring at the floor. "Oh, Jack," she started, but I cut her off. "With Ryan," I said, my voice barely audible. Her jaw dropped. "Wait, Ryan? As in our Ryan?" "Yeah." She froze, her hand halfway to her mouth. "Jesus Christ," she whispered. "What the hell is wrong with him?" "It's not just him," I said, my voice shaking. "She's been with others. I don't even know how many." Lisa leaned back, her face pale. Jack, I don't even know what to say." I laughed, but it came out bitter and broken. "That makes two of us." "You didn't deserve this," she said firmly, her voice filled with conviction. "You've been nothing but good to her." "Then why wasn't I enough?" I asked, my voice cracking. Why did she feel like she had to go somewhere else? To him? Lisa grabbed my arm, her grip firm. "Don't do that, Jack. Don't blame yourself for her choices." "She said I wasn't there for her," I said quietly, "that I made her feel invisible. Maybe she's right." "Stop," Lisa said sharply. "That's just an excuse. She's trying to shift the blame onto you because it's easier than owning up to what she did." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the doubt was already there, eating away at me. "What do I do?" I asked finally. My voice sounded small, even to me. Lisa sighed, her eyes softening. "You leave, Jack. You walk away. Because if you stay, this will destroy you." I sat in my car outside Lisa's house for a long time after that. Her words kept running through my head, but they didn't bring me any peace. My phone buzzed on the seat beside me. Another call from Jessica. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Instead, I did something I swore I wouldn't. I called Tom. He answered on the second ring. "Jack? It's late. What's going on?" "She cheated on me," I said flatly. There was a pause. "Jessica?" "Yeah. With Ryan." "Ryan?" His voice rose. "Your nephew Ryan? What the hell?" "Yeah," I said bitterly. "Jesus Christ, Jack." He let out a long breath. "I don't even know what to say." "Neither do I said. Tom's voice grew sharp. "What are you gonna do?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Then let me tell you what to do," he said. "You make her pay." I barked out a bitter laugh. "Make her pay? What does that even mean, Tom? Go beat the crap out of Ryan? Throw Jessica's stuff on the lawn? What does any of that solve?" "It doesn't solve anything," he said bluntly, "but it'll make you feel better." I didn't respond. "Jack, listen to me," Tom said. "You can't just let her get away with this. She betrayed you. Ryan betrayed you. And if you let them off the hook, you're just gonna hate yourself even more." I hung up without saying goodbye. When I got home, the lights were still on. Jessica was sitting on the couch, her phone clutched in her hands. When she saw me, she stood up, her eyes wide and puffy. "Jack," she said softly, "I was worried about you." I walked past her into the kitchen without a word. "Can we talk?" she called after me. "What's there to talk about?" I said, grabbing a glass from the cupboard. "Everything," she said, following me. "Jack, I know I hurt you. But what?" I snapped, spinning around to face her. "You love me? Is that what you're gonna say?" "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I do love you, Jack. I know I made a mistake, but we can fix this." "Fix this?" I laughed bitterly. "Jessica, you didn't just cheat. You destroyed everything we had. You destroyed me." She sobbed, clutching her arms around herself. "I'm sorry. I'll do anything, Jack. Just tell me what to do." I stared at her, my chest tight. For a moment, I thought about yelling, screaming, breaking something. But instead, I just shook my head. "I need time," I said quietly. Her lip quivered. "Time." "Yes, Jessica. Time. To think. To breathe. To figure out if I can even look at you again." She nodded, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I walked past her and up the stairs, closing the door to the bedroom behind me. I leaned against it, my body trembling, and for the first time in years, I cried. The next morning felt unreal, like I was moving through water. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your chest and makes it hard to breathe. I heard Jessica moving upstairs. Every creak of the floorboards sent a wave of nausea through me. I stayed in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. My mind was replaying everything Ryan said, over and over, like a broken record. And then, just like clockwork, I heard her footsteps coming down the stairs. She hesitated in the doorway, clutching the banister like it was holding her together. "Jack," she said softly. I didn't look up. "Jack," she tried again, her voice breaking. "What?" My voice was flat, empty. "We need to talk." I finally raised my eyes to meet hers. She looked small, fragile, like someone I barely recognized. It made me furious. How dare she look broken? That was my role, wasn't it? "You want to talk?" I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "Fine. Sit down." She stepped forward slowly, like she was approaching a wild animal, and slid into the chair across from me. Her hands fidgeted with the hem of her sweater, her eyes darting anywhere but at mine. "Say it," I said, leaning back. She swallowed. "Say what?" "All of it, Jessica. No more lies. No more excuses. Just tell me the damn truth." Her lips trembled, and for a second, I thought she wouldn't. But then she nodded, like she was steeling herself. "Okay," she whispered. "How long?" I asked, cutting to the heart of it. She winced, looking down at her lap. "With Ryan, about 6 months." 6 months. Half a year. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to stay calm. "And the others?" Her head snapped up, her face pale. "What?" "You heard me," I said coldly. "The others, Jessica. Don't act like Ryan's the only one." "How many?" Her breath hitched, and she looked away again. I don't know." I slammed my fist on the table, making her flinch. "How many?" "5, she said finally, her voice barely audible. My chest felt like it caved in. I leaned back, staring at her, trying to process the number. 5. And those were just the ones she admitted to. "Who?" I asked, my voice low, dangerous. "Jack, please." "Who?" I roared, my voice shaking the walls. She broke down then, sobbing into her hands. "Ryan. Someone from work. A guy I met at the gym." Her voice trailed off. I laughed bitterly, the sound hollow. "The gym? Of course. That's rich." "And," she hesitated. I leaned forward, my heart pounding. "And the mailman," she whispered, her voice cracking. For a second, I thought I misheard her. I blinked, staring at her like she'd just grown a second head. "The mailman?" She nodded, her shoulders shaking. It wasn't serious, Jack. None of it was serious. I was lonely. I was lonely," I repeated, laughing bitterly. You keep saying that like it's supposed to mean something. Like it's supposed to make me feel sorry for you. I'm not asking for your pity, she said, her voice rising. But you were never there, Jack. You were always working, always stressed, always somewhere else. And that justifies this? I snapped, gesturing toward her. That makes it okay to destroy everything we built? To humiliate me? I wasn't trying to hurt you, she cried. Well, congratulations, I said coldly. You did. She sobbed harder, her hands gripping the edge of the table like it might save her from drowning. I don't know what to do, she whispered, looking up at me with tear-streaked cheeks. Tell me what to do, Jack. Please. I stared at her, my jaw tight. You want me to tell you what to do? How about this? Pack your things and leave. Her eyes widened, panic flashing across her face. What? Jack? No. There's nothing left here, Jessica, I said, my voice firm. You killed it. All of it. And you don't get to stay here and pretend like we can fix this. She reached out, grabbing my hand. Please, Jack. I know I messed up, but I love you. I still love you. I pulled my hand away like her touch burned me. You don't get to say that. You don't get to sit there and tell me you love me after everything you've done. She broke then, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. I stood up, pushing the chair back with a scrape. Be gone by tomorrow, I said, turning my back on her. Jack. I mean it, Jessica, I said, cutting her off. I don't want to see you here when I get home. I walked out of the room, her cries echoing behind me. Later that night, I got a call from Ryan. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Uncle Jack, he said, his voice shaky. What do you want? I asked coldly. I wanted to say I'm sorry. Save it, I said. I don't want your apology, Ryan. I don't want anything from you. I know I messed up, he said quickly, but I didn't come to you to hurt you. I came because you deserve to know the truth. Did I? I asked, my voice sharp. Or did you just want to ease your own guilt? He hesitated. It wasn't like that. No, I said, my anger bubbling up again. Then what was it like, Ryan? Tell me, because I'd love to hear how you justified sleeping with my wife. I didn't mean for it to happen, he said, his voice breaking. But you have to know, she wasn't just cheating with me. There were others. I know, I said flatly. There was a pause. You do? Yeah, she told me. Ryan sighed, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. Ryan, I said finally, do me a favor. Don't call me again. Uncle Jack. I mean it, I said. You made your choices. Now you live with them. I hung up before he could respond. When I went to bed that night, the house felt colder than it ever had before. I stared at the empty side of the bed, the space where Jessica used to sleep, and for the first time, I felt relief that it was empty. I didn't touch her note. It just sat there on the counter like a landmine. I couldn't read her words without hearing her voice, and I couldn't hear her voice without wanting to scream. So I left it, untouched, crumpled, and ignored. I sat in the kitchen most of the morning, staring at nothing. The coffee in my mug had long gone cold, but I kept holding it like it was keeping me anchored. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of her. Jessica laughing, smiling, leaning in close to Ryan, to Ethan, to God knows who else. I was suffocating in my own thoughts, and I hated it. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It was Tom. Again. I let it ring. Then it rang again. On the third try, I picked up, my voice flat. What? Good morning to you too, he said, sarcasm dripping from his tone. I didn't respond. Jack, look, I know you don't want to hear it, but you can't just sit there doing nothing, he said. This thing with Jessica, it's eating you alive. What do you want me to do, Tom? I snapped. What's your brilliant plan? Should I go punch Ryan in the face? Throw Jessica's clothes on the lawn? How does that fix anything? It's not about fixing anything, Tom said, his voice sharper now. It's about making them face what they've done. Don't just let them walk all over you, Jack. You deserve better than that. I let out a bitter laugh. Deserve better? That's a funny thing to say when your wife's been screwing your nephew and half the town. Tom was silent for a moment. Then he said, What about Ethan? I frowned. What about him? Talk to him, Tom said. He's part of this mess too, isn't he? Maybe he knows something you don't. The idea made my stomach churn. I hated the thought of seeing him, of looking him in the eye. But there was a small part of me that wanted answers. Needed them. I'll think about it, I muttered. Good, Tom said. And Jack, don't let this break you. You're stronger than this. I hung up without replying. I don't know what possessed me to do it, but an hour later, I found myself sitting in my car outside the gym. Ethan's gym. My palms were sweaty, and my heart was pounding like I was about to step into a fight. When he finally walked out, I got out of the car, my body moving on autopilot. Ethan, I called out. He turned, his face twisting in confusion when he saw me. Jack? Yeah, I said, walking up to him. We need to talk. He hesitated, glancing around like he was looking for an escape. What about? Jessica, I said, my voice sharp. His whole body tensed, and I saw something flicker in his eyes. Guilt. Good. He should feel guilty. Look, man, I don't think. I'm not here to fight, I said, cutting him off. I just want answers. He sighed, shifting his gym bag on his shoulder. Fine. Let's talk. We ended up sitting on the curb outside the gym, a few feet apart. The silence between us was heavy, and I could feel the anger simmering under my skin. How long? I asked finally. He didn't meet my eyes. A few months. I clenched my fists. Months, I repeated. Why? What do you mean, why? He asked, his voice defensive. I mean, why her? Why me? Why did you think it was okay to do that to another man? I didn't know she was married at first, he said quickly. She didn't tell me. And when you found out? He hesitated. I don't know, man. By then, it was already happening. I didn't know how to stop. That's not an excuse, I snapped. I know it's not, he shot back. You think I'm proud of this? I made a mistake. Okay? I screwed up. But I'm not the only one here. Don't, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Don't try to put this all on her. I'm not, he said quickly. But you have to understand. She's not who you think she is. I laughed bitterly. Oh, trust me. I figured that out. Ethan looked at me then, his expression uneasy. There's more you don't know. My stomach tightened. What? There were others, he said quietly. I stared at him, my blood running cold. How do you know that? She told me, he admitted. She said I wasn't the only one. I didn't know who the others were, but... He trailed off, and I felt the floor drop out from under me. Get up, I said, standing suddenly. What? Get up, I repeated, my voice shaking. I can't do this anymore. He stood, holding his hands up defensively. Look, Jack, I'm sorry. Save it, I snapped, walking away. When I got home, Jessica's car was in the driveway. I froze, the anger bubbling up all over again. She wasn't supposed to be here. When I walked in, she was sitting on the couch, her hands folded in her lap. She looked up at me with wide, tear-filled eyes. Jack, she said softly, what the hell are you doing here? I said coldly. I needed to see you, she said, standing. I needed to explain. Explain what? I interrupted. How you lied to me. How you destroyed everything we had. I already talked to Ethan, Jessica. I know everything. Her face crumpled, and she took a step toward me. Jack, please. No, I said sharply, stepping back. You don't get to do this. You don't get to sit here and beg for forgiveness after everything you've done. Tears streamed down her face. I know I hurt you. I know I broke your trust. But I still love you, Jack. I do. I laughed bitterly. You love me? Is that what you tell every guy you sleep with? She sobbed harder, her hands shaking. It was a mistake. No, Jessica, I said, my voice firm. It was a choice. 100 choices. And now you get to live with them. Her knees buckled, and she sank onto the couch, sobbing into her hands. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at her. I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't feel sad. I just felt done. Get out, I said quietly. She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. What? You heard me, I said, turning away. Pack your things and leave. I don't want to see you here when I get back. Jack, please. I didn't answer. I walked upstairs and closed the door behind me, her cries echoing through the house. When I came downstairs the next morning, the house was quiet. Jessica's car was gone, and so were most of her things. She'd left her keys on the counter, right next to the crumpled note I never read. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the empty space where she'd been. It didn't feel like relief. It didn't feel like freedom. It felt like the hollow aftermath of a storm, the kind that leaves everything in ruins. I wasn't planning to call Ryan. I told myself he didn't deserve my time or my words. But as the day dragged on, the anger kept simmering, building until it was too much. I dialed his number before I could talk myself out of it. He picked up on the second ring. Uncle Jack? Where are you? I asked, my voice cold. There was a pause. A home. Why? Stay there, I said, hanging up before he could reply. When I pulled into his driveway, Ryan came out onto the porch, looking like he hadn't slept in days. He stuffed his hands into his pockets, his shoulders hunched. Jack, he said carefully, like he was testing the waters. Look, I know you're mad. Mad, I said, stepping closer. Mad doesn't even begin to cover it, Ryan. You betrayed me. You betrayed this family. And for what? A fling? He flinched but didn't look away. It wasn't a fling, he said quietly. I cared about her. I laughed bitterly. You cared about her? She's my wife, Ryan. My wife. I know, he said, his voice cracking. I know I screwed up. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed you to know. It wasn't just about the physical stuff. I thought there was something real between us. Something real? I snapped, stepping closer. She cheated on me with 5 different men. You weren't special, Ryan. You were just convenient. His face twisted in pain, but I didn't care. I don't care what you thought, I continued. You're nothing to me now. Do you understand that? Nothing. Uncle Jack. Don't call me that, I said sharply. You don't get to call me that anymore. The words hit him hard. He looked like he wanted to say something, but in the end, he just nodded, his head hanging low. I stared at him for a long moment, the anger still burning in my chest. Then I turned and walked away. Back at the house, I couldn't sit still. The silence was too loud, the memories too fresh. I went into the garage and grabbed a box of Jessica's old things. The photos, the keepsakes, the pieces of our life together that I couldn't bear to look at anymore. I drove to the edge of town, to an empty field where we used to go on picnics before everything fell apart. I parked the car, pulled out the box, and poured lighter fluid over everything inside. The flame caught quickly, spreading through the photos and letters like a wave. I stood there, watching as the memories burned, the smoke curling into the sky. It wasn't cathartic. It wasn't satisfying. It just was. I thought I was done. I thought I could move on, or at least start to. But a week later, I got a call from Lisa. Jack, she said, her voice tense. You're not gonna believe this. What? I asked, bracing myself. Jessica's been talking to Mom and Dad, she said. She's trying to spin the story, saying you were the one who wasn't faithful, that you drove her to it. I closed my eyes, my jaw tightening. Of course she is. She's trying to get sympathy, Lisa continued. She's saying you were cold, distant, and that you were seeing someone else. That's a lie, I said flatly. I know, Lisa said quickly, but you need to be ready for this. She's not done, Jack. She's not going to just walk away quietly. Let her talk, I said, the anger simmering again. People can believe what they want. I don't owe anyone an explanation. Jack. I'm done, Lisa, I said firmly. She's not my problem anymore. But she wasn't done. A few days later, Jessica showed up at the house, uninvited. I opened the door, and there she was, her hair pulled back, her makeup carefully done. She looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Perfectly polished, perfectly fake. What do you want, Jessica? I asked, my voice cold. I needed to see you, she said, stepping closer. We never really talked, Jack. Not really. We talked plenty, I said. You just didn't like what I had to say. Jack, please, she said, her voice soft. I know I hurt you, but we've been through so much together. Don't let this be how it ends. This is exactly how it ends, I said, stepping back. You made your choices, Jessica. Now you live with them. Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Goodbye, Jessica, I said, shutting the door before she could say another word. That night, I sat on the porch, staring out at the darkened street. The anger was gone, replaced by something quieter, something heavier. It wasn't closure. It wasn't peace. But it was something. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. And that was enough.